Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Braap O'Clock. This is the show where I go on a ride with a different guest in each episode. We talk about life, careers, riding, and a whole lot more as we brap along. This series is made possible by Cardo, the in-helmet intercom system that allows us to chat while we ride. You can save 10% on Cardo intercom units using the code KP10, and that is linked below. Today, I am joined by Mike Tlusty of Deja Moto, a highly respected suspension and tooling business located in Southwest Montana. Mikey, thanks for being up here in the mountains with me today.
Heck yeah, brother. This is gonna be great.
Yes, sir.
Gotta hit the switchback right off the bat. All right.
Beautiful views to start it off. So, to jump into it, I've had the opportunity to watch you work for the last 8 years since I met you, and I can honestly say your attention to detail and the way you handle your business is second to none. I've been very impressed watching you work, and what I can say is anyone who brings their suspension to you or purchases a tool from you can know with confidence that it's a quality product and that you've taken care of it. So, I'm curious, the way you handle things, has this been an innate character trait of yours, or is it something you had to work at? And are there any experience you've had where maybe that has lapsed? What'd you learn from it? And what was the result of that?
That's a good question, Kincaid. Yeah, I can't actually say that I had really considered myself a highly detailed person at any point in my life until, well, I guess maybe when my machining career really started taking off. That would have been, 2005-ish, or sorry, more like 2008. I moved to Montana in 2005 and really started to get into the stride of my machining career around, the late 2000s, and was kind of climbing the ladder at the place I was working, and we worked on it was a really interesting shop we had. When I started, there was only a handful of guys, and then by the time I left 10 years later, there was 2 shifts. I think there ended up being 20-some employees, and, climbed myself into a position of, I guess, management or lead, and made a lot of changes in the company. And I believe my attention to detail kind of was cultivated at that point throughout that growth. It's one thing to work for somebody else and then have to do quality work, and because it's their reputation, and then it's another thing to have to do it for yourself. So I don't know, I guess a lot of it is I like when I buy things and they work. So why shouldn't other people be given that same treatment?
That was a cheeky little pivot you had there, Mikey. I had to get off the bike for that one.
Oh, yeah.
So with that, do you have any kind of examples where that may have lapsed in the suspension business and anything you learned from it, or can you proudly say that anything that's come out of your shop that you put your hands on has been, mistake-free?
Oh, definitely not mistake-free. Without being too self-incriminating, we're all human, right? And you don't know necessarily what you don't know. And sometimes those are the best times because you don't even know how bad you could screw it up. And then the more you know, the more the horrors you see, you're like, oh man. But specifically, I don't have any specific examples where I knew I majorly messed up, aside from my own stuff. I did most of my experimentation on my own stuff, but also when I was doing my experimentation, I was racing motocross at the time, so the consequences for having something come apart was pretty high. So
right,
I just made sure that. Whoa, no dab!
Oh, I'm sure dabbing.
But so yeah, you know, again, I don't know if you've heard of the like the Dunning-Kruger effect or what that is.
I don't believe I have.
I don't know much about it, but the gist of it is, typically somebody has the most confidence with their knowledge on a subject very early in their time on the subject. So again, kind of along the lines of you don't know what you don't know. So you haven't seen the horrors that can occur. So you're maybe think that you know more than you actually do. And I saw, you know, luckily with the internet, you know, I was learning a lot of what I learned. The internet was around, so you can do a ton of research and you can see these horrors and try to understand them before you ever attempt something like that yourself.
Right.
And here's the other thing, is that I didn't really choose the suspension industry. I kind of fell into it in a sense. My goal was always to get back to manufacturing, and my means to get there was to just start a little dirt bike shop because that's what I knew. And I started with general service and whatnot, and then eventually transitioned to suspension tuning. But so I didn't have any actual classic education on it, which is kind of actually crazy to think about. But by the time I started asking people, I was asking around to several different franchises to see like what the deal was, because you know you can be a franchisee, you know, whether that's like you know, TBT or Evo. But I just kind of set out to learn it myself, and by the time I asked some people about franchising, people in the industry, they're like, you already know enough, you don't really need to do it. So I'm like, oh shit, okay, well.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly goes with the whole concept of you know, fake it till you make it. Like, my mom's always talked about that, and I think about even with what I'm doing, where everything I'm doing right now has been, you know, kind of self-taught on the internet, and you've found yourself at a much higher level to where, you know, the current level at what you're doing things in suspension is seriously high caliber work, and I know you're aware of that. But you had mentioned how the goal was to get back into machining, and that kind of brings me into the second question. I know when I met you, you're doing suspension full time, and you had mentioned to me very early on that your long-term goal was to start machining tools, and you know, fill this gap in the suspension market that you saw existed, and do it better than anyone was doing for those tools that were lacking. So here we are 8 years later. I realized that took an enormous investment in your business and an enormous chance on yourself. You had to buy a CNC machine. You had to spend countless hours of your incredibly valuable time. So I'm curious, how confident were you that it would all work? What were the biggest challenges you faced in making that transition and starting this business? And what are your biggest takeaways now that that idea has become a reality?
Yeah, I think you're making it sound a lot easier or a lot more well planned than what it actually was. You're correct in that I was, you know, the goal was to get back to manufacturing, but I didn't necessarily know at the time that I was going to be doing it manufacturing suspension tools. Because to be honest, at the time, I hadn't been doing enough suspension to really be aware that, oh shit. Really be aware, yeah. Wow, look at that, dude. How do you like that?
Real.
How am I supposed to think about what I'm talking about right now with all this?
Pretty spectacular.
Yeah, bud. So yeah, I guess the plan wasn't necessarily to fill a gap in the suspension tooling market. because I didn't really know there was one very early on. The goal was to get back to manufacturing, but as time went on, that goal became less and less doable. It was really, really hard, dude, early in the days of my business with just doing general repair work and early on in the suspension business. Again, kind of going back to earlier about like, I wouldn't even really say I totally faked it until I made it. I mean, I didn't, but I wanted to be really sure about stuff before I put it out there. So like, you know, certain upgrades, you know, selling certain products, I wanted to make sure I ran them through the mill. And the only reason I say that is because, again, I was cutting my teeth on suspension while I was racing motocross, and I was racing for A-class wins and A-class championships in the States, so I was going plenty fast. and I was like, this stuff has to work and it has to be reliable, so I'm not willing to just like wing it. You know, I'm not gonna just slap something on somebody's bike, because that's definitely not what I want. So I would run it through the ringer, and I would say I am a little bit of a minority in this industry in that I take my time on stuff like that before I ever offer it, and I kind of put it through the ringer. And unfortunately, that results in me just not selling as much stuff.
For sure. And I should probably, you know, clarify on the fake it till you make it. I think I meant in the sense of not having to have, you know, the traditional learning experience or the traditional process that one might go through to get where you are. You know, not in the sense of not doing it to a quality manner. I think that's kind of the whole takeaway here, as to what level you're doing this is seriously impressive.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's been a shitload of work, and again, yeah, it all just comes down to like being suspicious of everything. And like, you know, I forget who says it, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Right. And there's just so many things that I was like, okay, people are calling this life-changing. I don't see it. Like, what? Based on what? Like, where's the data? What was the process used to come to that conclusion? And I always just kind of felt like it lacked a little bit. It was more marketing and placebo than anything. To a certain extent. I mean, there are things too that are very much more so that way, but it just depends, right?
As you mentioned there, your history as a A-level motocross racer, and I know oh boy,
this is not.
This is why this trail can get you. It's freaking exposed and gnarly.
I'm just gonna He-Man this thing up here, dude. That's my only option right now.
All right. Let me know if you want a hand.
Just on the count of 3. 1, 2.
There you go.
Okay. That's some old man strength right there.
There you go. All right. As we work her back on the trail, you mentioned your history as a racer, and I've had the privilege to ride with you on numerous occasions now, and I can honestly say you're one of the most calculated, precise, and efficient riders I've ever met.
As I just threw it off the trail.
Yeah, great time for this question. But it's clear that some of that suspension prowess and the way you treat that reflects in your riding. And I'm curious if the way you handle suspension builds impacted. Ooh. Oh wow, big old landslide here. That's a little bit of a tricky one, eh?
Yeah.
So, did this hyper attentive riding style come first? And if so, how did it affect your knowledge and growth in the suspension world?
If any of my racing buddies hear this, they're gonna be laughing right now, because they'll tell you I was one of the more wild, just ragdoll central. I crashed a lot, and I crashed pretty hard. But I'm 40 now, Kincaid, And we didn't really start riding together till I was, mid-30s, right?
Right.
Late 30s. So I'd already got all that out of my system before we really started riding together. But no, I hit the dirt a lot of times, dude. And I wouldn't say that there's a correlation, but you can actually still use the two as correlation. It's kind of funny you actually bring that up. I had a guy helping me in the shop, and I've had a lot of people helping me in the shop over the years, but most recently, a helper, very, how do I say this? There's a lot of emphasis on speed and not as much on detail, which was very interesting. My helper kind of sort of was trying to match the speed in which I can do suspension after having my hands in it now for 15 years, but there was a lot of details that were missed. And so that's one of the things I actually kind of brought up. I was like, look, man, this is just like suspension tuning is just like racing dirt bikes. You have to know when to go slow and know when to go fast. Realizing that one small error can mean you get pretty messed up, right? So it's like when it comes to like putting shim stacks together, or just the process, all the little pieces in a suspension system that have a pretty significant impact on how it functions. You got to pay attention to that stuff, but like, washing stuff down or packaging stuff up, like, not as important. That can be done with a little bit more haste, but still, there's still a standard that it needs to be done to. Think I can get it?
I think you can. No dabs?
No dabs.
That was beautiful. May have dabbed. Almost had it. So did your riding efficiency, I mean, a lot of it, a lot of the riding we've done together is hard enduro, where you beat me with efficiency and knowing exactly how to ride the bike, when to push, when not to. We've talked a lot about it over the years as well. So is that just something that you've learned later on in life as the types of riding you do has changed and you've gotten a little older?
Yeah, 100%. I guess I've been forced to, because, I don't know, I'm getting older and fatter, and I don't work out like as often as I should, and, business is a huge priority of mine, and honestly, doing other things is a huge priority of mine. Now, I get pretty burned out on the dirt biking thing fairly often, because so much of the time I'm on the bike, I'm kind of working. I'm always trying or testing something, or like challenging a theory that I have. And so dirt biking has actually turned into a fair amount of work for me, and it makes it a little bit difficult to enjoy. So I've picked up other hobbies, and so that means my riding fitness has gone down a lot, which has forced me to have to learn how to ride more efficiently. How's it going? Good. Thanks so much. Have a good hike.
Thanks a lot. Just the two of us.
So yeah, I think I've kind of been forced to just be more efficient. And yeah, dude, it's kind of sad. You'll get there someday when you're like, dang, dude, I can't do what I used to do anymore. I mean, it is still possible, right? Like, no excuses. I think about my buddy Josh at Enduro Method. He's 40. That dude is tore up. He's so fit, and he keeps getting better and better and better on dirt bikes, trials bikes, everything. So it's no excuse, right? I don't have an excuse, but the reality of the matter is I'm just not going to dedicate that much of my life to it. I want to also enjoy other things. And so, yeah, I would say the efficiency part was more because I've been forced to. That's how I'm able to just maintain what I'm doing, is by just backing off on the peak intensity a little bit and just trying to really dissect how to do this with the least amount of energy, which plays into the whole suspension thing, actually, as it turns out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like you said, it's well, you might be bummed that you're not riding like you were in your 20s. Like, I think the takeaway of being able to be aware of the, you know, the change in fitness and find a way to adjust and still ride at a high level is super impressive. On our Idaho ride this weekend, there was a guy in the front of the pack that was 66 years old riding just about my full A-level XC pace. And it was so impressive to chase him through that stuff and realize you can just keep doing it if you just keep doing it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, man. I think about that a lot. Even just some of my friends that I ride with and that are all getting older and kind of like, man, some of my friends are absolute just like, I don't want to say just like some people in general, they just have kind of that, I don't know, just like, they're just tough dudes, right? Or chicks too. Like, they're just tough people. They can just, I don't know, they can just gut it out.
100%.
I'm not that guy. I've got a certain level of suffering tolerance, but I don't enjoy just like, yeah, I don't know.
So you had mentioned getting into other hobbies, and I realize some people might call this a midlife crisis. Others would just say it's plain awesome, but I heard through the grapevine that you recently purchased a sailboat with no sailing experience in the landlocked state of Montana.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's not true that I had zero sailing experience. My only sailing experience I've had was I was like, I don't know, maybe 10 years old. I remember my brother and sister, quite a bit older than me, were at like a church camp, and we went up to like a church camp in the fall. It was kind of late fall, like it was sweatshirt weather, and it was on a lake in Wisconsin, and oh, I don't know what kind of bird that is. Anyway, it was on a lake, and they had little tiny single, monohull sailboats out on the water. I think those are quail or something. I don't know. Pheasant. And they had little paddle boats up on the shore, so I took a paddle boat out to the sailboat, got in the sailboat, put up the sail, unhooked the thing. The wind was blowing pretty good. It blew me out a little ways and then flipped me over. threw me into the water. And dude, it was so freaking good. That was honestly probably the closest I've ever been to drowning or like getting hypothermia and dying in the water. I crawl up onto the hull of the boat. It was upside down, so I crawl up on the hull and start yelling, and some kid came out and got me with the different paddle boat and dragged me back to shore. But so that was my only sailboating experience.
Okay, so I stand corrected with your one near-death experience sailing. What was it that motivated this new endeavor, and what's so exciting about just doing something that's new to you after all these years of doing something that you've become so proficient at?
Yeah, dude, it's the chase and the initial learning curve, right? That super steep part of the learning curve where, like, that's probably one of the better feelings when you learn something new and you're just taking massive steps in proficiency every time you go out, right? So, like, that's addictive. You just, I don't know, man. For me, it is anyway. It's addictive. So,
where I can relate in that is my introduction to snowmobiling. I'm not a real good snowmobiler yet. Nor do I know if I ever will be, but I will say my first season was by far my most fun because I loved not having any freaking clue what I was doing and having to figure it out.
Exactly, dude. Yeah, you get it.
And I think, for me, like, I had the opportunity to do a lot as a kid. My parents introduced me to a lot, so a lot of those new things are kind of few and far between, so it's really cool to have that opportunity. So I don't know if that's similar to how you feel with this sailing endeavor.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. So this isn't my first midlife crisis endeavor either. This last winter, like actually in the spring kind of, all of a sudden, I got into, I just got obsessed with snowboard soft boot carving.
Okay.
So, yes, that's about as niche as you can get, man. But here's the thing, you know, I've snowboarded my whole life, or most of my life. I started skiing, got to snowboard in high school, and I've been snowboarding ever since. Spent, you know, 5-10 years doing a lot of really cool backcountry stuff. You know, put in my time at the resorts. I was a park rat, all that. But then I just have had some ankle injuries over the years with moto and other stuff, and that started really messing up my snowboarding. So I pretty much had to learn. I normally ride goofy-footed, so my non-dominant foot, or sorry, right foot forward. Which is weird because that's my dominant foot. Normally it's the other way around. But my bad ankle would have been my left ankle, my rear leg, and that, dude, I could not handle it. It hurts so bad to snowboard over any amount of bumps. So I had to take up skiing, dude. It just hurt too much. But eventually I kind of got to a point in skiing too. I learned pretty quick, and you know, I started getting okay. And I was skiing actually this last winter. I skied some runs that were some of the hardest runs I've done on a snowboard. So I was like, wow,
awesome.
Yeah. But then also, I still like snowboarding and I try to do it, but I had to learn how to ride switch. So I actually got really good at riding switch too. And in some respects, I'm a little better on switch on some things than I am regular footed. So like that was fun, but I was kind of reaching a little bit of a wall on all this stuff, to where it's like, to really do any more, I'm starting to have to take some pretty big risks. And I'm not really just willing to write those checks anymore, you know?
Totally fair.
When it goes wrong. So all of a sudden I watched some guy on he had normal soft boots, right? A twin tip board. Normal soft boots, not like what you think with like a carving board with hard boots and kind of directional setup.
Yeah.
He had still twin tip, you know, like bi-directional binding setup, and he was laying down the sickest, gnarliest carves. Dude, his face was like 3 inches off the snow. And I'm like, holy shit, how is he doing that? And so I think I saw him because we were like on alternating laps on the chairlift. You know, I watched him a couple times, just putting down the sickest big old arcs, dude, just like pretty much laying on the corduroy. But it wasn't it wasn't your traditional directional snowboard setup. So I'm like, that's badass. I want to do that. And so I went on like a 3-week-long bender trying to figure out what this whole soft boot snowboarding thing is. And by that time I ran out of winter, and you know, the season was over. So that was my first midlife crisis ordeal.
Well, now you're making me want to try it.
Right? And that's the thing. You would have asked me 10 years ago, I'd be like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life.
So outside of, you know, snowboarding and riding dirt bikes, what other big passions have you had in your life? And, you know, what do you think drives those? What makes you passionate about a certain thing? And what keeps you coming back to dirt bikes?
Well, I'm an adrenaline junkie, so anything that goes fast, it looks like it can be a little bit sketchy, I'm into it. That's, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily passion, or it's just as easily like, just thrill seeking, you know? I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly. Are you asking like what my motivation for pursuing these things?
Yeah, I suppose so. I think that's a very fair response, is you don't have to necessarily be passionate about it to want to experience it.
Yeah, no, I'm passionate about getting a rush and learning things quickly and seeing something that I think looks super cool, and knowing that I can't just go out and do it right away, but I know that I can get there it's just gonna, and that the process of discovery is gonna be super fun. I think that's what I'm passionate about. Like totally geeking out and being stoked. It's the stoke, dude. That's it. It's the stoke. Coming off of something, seeing something and being like, I know I can't do that right now, but I know someday I will be able to. And so then you set out to do it, and every time you go do it, you get done, you're like, holy shit, I can't believe I just got that much closer. Like what I just did felt really freaking cool, but I know it doesn't look anything like the one that I saw, and I can't even fathom how that's gonna feel when I get to that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a perfect answer.
Yeah, so yeah, perfect example. Yeah, the freaking carving board, and then the sailboat, dude. Literally, all it was my one. I actually do kind of like consulting work for a company, and the general manager. I don't know. We were in a meeting, and somebody made a mention of a sailboat, and I'm like, what? And he's like, oh yeah, I bought a sailboat. I'm like, oh, that's random. Like, let me see. And he shows me, and it's, as it turns out, it's the same exact sailboat I have. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm like, where do you do that? He's like, oh, you know, whatever, Ennis Lake or Harrison or Cane Ferry, whatever. I'm like, oh, that's cool. He's like, have you ever seen these things, like, in the water? I'm like, no. He shows me a YouTube video. It's a Hobie Cat 16 little catamaran style beach sailboat. And dude, they are freaking ripping on this thing. It's so sketchy. They're like hanging off the side of the catamaran, attached to these little trapeze wires, and one of the hulls of the catamaran is like up in the air, and they're like standing on it, trying to keep this thing from capsizing, hauling ass in the water. And I'm like, holy shit, that looks so fun and so sketchy. I have to do it. And 2 weeks later, I owned a boat.
That is awesome.
And I'll tell you what, dude, being scared shitless and not sure if you can do it is probably one of the biggest rushes. I went out on last Sunday for the first time with one of our friends, Sam. Dude, I was freaking out. Like the wind was barely even blowing, and I was freaking out, dude. And it was super scary, but it was like super lame, you know? Look at that. How do you like that shit, dude?
Completely stunning.
Yeah, dude.
Alrighty, taking over the lead here for a little bit as we resume from looking at that absolutely stellar view. So, Mikey, as someone who is obviously very knowledgeable and has a lot of resources, I believe you could ask for a lot of favors. I mean, I don't even know how many shocks I've asked you to put nitrogen over the years, and that's just the start of it. And that always results in hanging out at your shop for an hour, shooting the shit, taking time out of your work day. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, so I'm curious, how do you manage friendships and relationships with business? And what sort of boundaries or lines do you have to draw as you navigate that as someone who's running a business?
Yeah, man, that's super, super tricky. And I'll be honest, I'm pretty bad about it. And that's honestly, that is some of the root of some of my burnout, I think, sometimes. Early in my tuning career, I did a lot of favors because I wanted to be straightforward with people and be like, look, I don't have a lot of experience in whatever thing that you're asking me to do. So if you're willing to maybe go, have to take your suspension on and off a few times, I will match your effort. And so sometimes it gets a little bit lost, like when I've become proficient and I no longer need the favor of their patience. Because also sometimes people are like, dude, I'm not gonna send my shit to somebody across the country that doesn't know anything about me or what I ride. They're like, I trust your process even if it takes a little longer or more tries, more than I trust just sending it to whoever. So there's some of that. But I think for me sometimes it's like, all right, like at a certain point, let's say that rider changes their bike brands and goes to a brand or something I'm really familiar with. And so then it's kind of like, Hey man, this one's retail because I've already done the work here and I'm really confident in what I can do on this particular thing. It's been tricky trying to kind of it's been really tricky trying to manage those boundaries, dude.
I mean, how often do you feel like, you know, it's appreciated and or reciprocated, or does it feel like constant giving for you? Because I realize, you know, like, I've asked you for plenty of favors, and I try and, you know, compensate when I can, and I never know if it's enough, and you're also not the type of guy to say, hey, here's what I need, which, yeah, I totally understand how it could lead to a little bit of burnout for you. So I was curious just how you navigate that.
Yeah, and you know, it depends on the person, right? Like, I think I have a pretty limitless willingness to help you, because you're not trying to do it to basically save yourself money, right? You're not just taking my time to save yourself money. And you're also a hustler. Like, you hustle and you like try really hard at what you're doing, and so that I respect. And so I'm much more willing to help hustlers, you know, that are trying to that are giving back to the riding community in some way, shape, or form, or, you know, doing what they're doing ethically. I feel like you're someone who does what you do very ethically, so you're somebody I want to help.
Thanks.
And I think I've actually told you that before, because you've asked me, you've been like, dude, I feel like I'm like kind of asking a lot, and I'm like, yeah, I can tell you to screw off anytime that I want, and I don't, because what you're doing is ethical, and I think it's great. So just ask away and just realize there might be a time or a day that I say no, but as of right now, we're good, you know?
Well, I appreciate that, but also just appreciate, you know, everything you do for this community, because I realize you do give a lot. Check out this buck right here, just prancing off into the woods.
Oh, I missed him. Well, so there's a whole nother layer of that onion, Kincaid, actually. I don't want to make this thing turn into a whole 5-hour-long ordeal, but so as part of my 2000s and 2010s racing career, I also was a pretty big part in the racing series here. I did a lot of the track maintenance, and I even did a lot of the track building. And then I also was the kind of the equipment guy for a race series that was here. And that whole thing, when it comes to like, what do I feel like I owe the riding community, or like even as a suspension tuner, right? Like, people are like, oh, you don't sponsor that many people. I don't sponsor that many people, like, really outwardly. Like, I don't really advertise when I'm helping people. They are welcome to. And sometimes there's some people I help and I don't want them to say anything because they're on like a bike or something that I normally don't work on. So
right.
Like just working on their stuff was a bit of a favor. Like, it takes me a lot more effort to do it than it would otherwise. And so it's like, yeah, consider it a sponsorship, but just don't tell anybody. Because I just simply don't have the capacity I just don't have the capacity anymore, you know?
100%.
But just to kind of follow up on, like, you know, me asking myself, what have I done for the riding community? Man, I gave a pretty significant chunk of the peak of my racing career. I gave a lot of that to the riding community in the form of hundreds of hours maintaining the tracks and building tracks for $0. So I actually honestly walk away from that experience with a little bit of a sense of resentment. I actually regret having given that much time to it, and it has definitely impacted how I spend my time on things in the future.
Well, that's totally fair, but I mean, also, like, you get to realize that you continue to have an immense impact on the local riding community and make your livelihood from it, which is incredible. You You know, it's like we've talked about the guys at different shops where it takes weeks or months to get suspension back, and guys want to ride, and you recognize that and care a lot about the people, and it shows in everything you do. So I mean, to wish you would have saved a little for yourself back then, but then see that you've turned it into a career now that a huge percentage of, you know, so many guys in this valley use and appreciate your services is really cool.
Yeah, now, you know, it's interesting you say about the people having to wait for their suspension. That was something I was pretty deliberate on very early in my business, was to never hijack people's bikes, essentially, for my own security. So, like, oh boy, I gotta get through this, hold on.
Little dusty back there?
Yeah, and it's just loose. But anyway, yeah, I didn't ever want to hijack people's dirt bikes for my own security, right? Like, yeah, I didn't want people to be without their bikes for months or whatever. I mean, even I get super stressed out if I have somebody's stuff for 2 weeks. And so pretty early on, I made a point to try to not to overcommit. I mean, I still do it all the time, but I've gotten way better about it. And I think as an industry whole, I'm really, really good about it. But what that means is I just say no to a lot more, or I'm very realistic and upfront about it. It might have the appearance of like really trying to, like, quote unquote take care of people. And I've overextended myself plenty of times and worked, you know, late into the Friday and Saturday morning to get everybody's stuff done, and that's a lot of the reason why I don't want anything to do with my dirt bike come Saturday, because I'm burned out on it. But I think I've done pretty decent at, like, not over-promising. I'm usually under-promising and over-delivering, and so that comes across as really high customer service. It's not that I'm doing a larger volume or, like, going at breakneck speeds, because I'm not. I still have a standard of quality, and that will not be compromised. I will not push volume. I will not sacrifice quality to increase volume. I just won't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge takeaway from this, and you know, a little bit, you know, you're kind of downplaying how important that is, I feel like, to you. Like, I know we've talked about this and what you deliver to your customers, and it certainly shows.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, I've tried really hard for that to be one of the pillars that the company stands on, is like zero compromises on quality, even if it comes at the expense of, you know, growth. I just won't. I just can't. So yeah, that was just kind of summarizing what you were saying about, like, really high customer satisfaction and, like, not making people wait too long. And that was by no other means besides me just, like, feeling really cognizant of the promises I make and trying to deliver on it, you know, and saying no to a lot, or just saying, like, look, I can't, you know, if I get a call on Monday, like, there are exceptions, right? Like, if I worked on something, you know, one of those rare instances where there was an early failure or an early problem, like 100%, I will take care of that person. But again, like, I really have to do that because I make sure I do it right the first time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think your approach is very admirable and not something you see in that many businesses anymore. So just, I guess, kudos there. And, you know, as a seasoned rider and as someone who's built a successful self-made business here, I guess, do you have any advice you would give your younger self, and maybe more importantly than that, any advice for the young generation of aspiring racers and business owners?
Yeah, you know, I try to live with no regrets, Kincaid, but I do have a little bit of a sense of regret not just going directly into the manufacturing when I quit my job. I do regret a little bit getting to where I got via the motorsports industry, because it unfortunately, I'm just always teetering on the edge of wanting to ride my dirt bike. So there's that cost. What's up, guys? How's it going? Good.
On that topic, do you kind of just wish you would have taken a more direct route? Like, you have some regret in the timeline of how long you let, that industry take over for your business and livelihood?
Yes. I didn't. So a couple things. The power sports service industry is really, really hard as a small independent. You got to work your ass off, and nowadays, with YouTube and information there's never been more information out there as there is right now. So your at-home guy can get really, really close to solving the problem that they have with their power sports equipment, depending on what resources they got their hands on and how much of a rush they're in, et cetera, et cetera. I charge what I charge, and I have my processes that I've kind of sussed out over doing this for a little while now, and so it is what it is. I don't really give a lot of options. I'm not going to compromise on some of those processes, and I realize that that's not for everybody. I think that's one of the hardest things, or one of the better realizations I've had recently was I understand that the services I'm offering isn't for everybody, and that's okay. Some people appreciate the level of detail and quality, and I'm not going to give it away. So what I'm getting at is the power sports route was hard because it took a really, really long time to convince people of that, or to find the people that appreciated that and allowed me to kind of sort of start making a living. Dude, it took 10 years to actually make a living, which is gnarly. And also, I just don't sell bullshit. So I think that's another thing that's been really hard for me, is that I'm not just going to grab the newest, shiniest thing and try to push it on people. And so I'm just not going to sell as much stuff, and that makes it hard. That ends up being way less revenue. So with the machining thing, there's so much less of that, right? You're given a specification, and you see if you can do it cheaper than the other guy, or if you have the relationship, it's kind of similar, honestly. They know you have a certain level of quality that they don't have to worry that you're cutting corners and missing stuff. It's honestly like any purchasing job in any company. You're kind of always a little bit wary of the cheapest bid, because it's well, what are you not doing that the other companies are doing?
Right.
It's not that every higher number is trying to rip you off. They might just know more and are able to see future problems better, and they build that into their process, so you never have to worry about it. Some of me thinks I would have been a lot further along had I just gone right into manufacturing, but I really am enjoying where I'm at right now, kind of making tiny waves in the suspension tooling industry, kind of making a little ripple, and companies are kind of starting to notice. So it's okay, do I think I could have been making a lot more money and had cooler toys by now had I just stayed in manufacturing? Probably. But you know what? That's not the path I chose, and that's the decision I got to live with. And it's a constant reminder to make better decisions moving forwards,
Right. So, yeah, I suppose all great,
Dude,
detail all this eroded wild,
holy
right?
Crap.
Yeah, this whole trail had a big old landslide, and they had to rebuild this whole section recently.
Dude, crazy.
Yeah, our favorite route jump is gone.
Holy crap. Sorry, I was just where am I right now?
No, it's all good. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yes, so that was all, very a detailed explanation of how you got where you are So I'm curious from a bigger picture, do those insights and the way things played out for you, does that give you anything you would want to share with
right.
kids, whether I said racers and prospective business owners, like it doesn't have to be motorsports related at all, just kind of like the life skills or lessons you've learned as a result of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that could be a whole podcast of itself. I don't know. And I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth here, because I'm saying I regret a little bit of the path I took, but at the same time, like, I think my passion for dirt biking has allowed me to get as far as I have and survive and weather the storm of starting up. So part of me feels like, I don't know if I would have been able to have as much, like, I don't know if I would have been able to tough out as many storms, in like just plain straight up manufacturing as I have with my dirt bike business, right? Like, dude, it was gnarly. I didn't make any money for like 5 years. I was like starving, but I love dirt bikes so much, I didn't care.
I mean, I think that is a great lesson in itself in continuing to push on. Like, I mean, I get asked frequently how I started and where I got to where I'm at with YouTube and everything, and it's like, it didn't happen overnight. It's just one step at a time to keep pushing forward, and like a core belief in yourself, right?
Yeah, yep, man, yeah, you just get every brick by brick. Rome wasn't built in a day. Like, all these generic sayings you hear, they're 100% true. Just every day, there's nothing flashy about it. You'll have moments of like, man, I remember when I made it to, I think it was my either third or fourth year, that was the statistical barrier to when most companies don't ever make it and they fail. And I was like, I freaking did it. I starved to death. I didn't have anything. I had nothing. I'm like, but I did it. And then in hindsight, I'm like, wait a minute. Like, did I really do it? Is that actually truly the measure of success, is so starving yourself to just survive? It's like, I don't know, but...
Well, that's where you get into the whole definition of success and what the goal in it is, which is, from my eyes, always been a sustained level of happiness.
Right, yeah. Dude, it's actually interesting. So I see, all right, let me kind of paraphrase this whole thing here, or make an example of it. So this is how I'm kind of giving back. I see these tuners that are 2, 3, 4, 5 years into their journey, and I'm like, dude, that is gnarly. That is a gnarly place to be. You're like, just know enough to kind of like get yourself in trouble. I guarantee you're not making hardly any money. Information overload. You don't have enough experience yet to really like formulate your own opinions and not be like completely indoctrinated by somebody else's opinions. I'm like, it's a gnarly spot to be. So that is actually one thing, and it's kind of a whole thing. There was a company out on the East Coast, Solid Performance. They're a huge WP center. Actually, I think they're the biggest WP center in the world. But man, they were so helpful when I was trying to sort through some of this like WP premium suspension stuff. Super helpful. Like their willingness to help and be like, it was unbelievable. I kind of didn't even know what was going on. It was like, why are you guys so nice? And Evan, the owner, and just all those guys, it's a really cool philosophy. They're all about just like, more or less, they want to have the same attitude with their business-to-business partners as they do with their riding buddies. It's like, Evan, the owner, put it best. He's like, we built this sport around like having fun with your buddies, and then all of a sudden we're super selfish and secretive when it comes to like how we work on them. He's like, it never made any sense to me. I'm like, that's so good. And so I've tried to propagate that concept. And so when I see these younger tuners and only a few years in, I try to help them as much as possible. I've probably given away thousands of dollars in tools to some of these younger tuners that I know don't have the dough, but I want them to be able to do it. Okay, I didn't.
You have a good one. But yeah, Mikey, it's super cool you say that, because I mean, it honestly makes me think about this entire motorcycle, I don't even want to say industry, because how's it going? Thank you. I don't want to say industry because I'm thinking more about the relationships I've built on it, through it, you know, every motorcycle event, most of my great friendships, a lot of them tie back to dirt bikes, and it's cool to look at the business side of it like that as well, and just it being people. So I think that's a wonderful takeaway. Yeah, I guess I want to thank you as well for going on this beautiful ride with me, talking about life and business as we rip through the mountains of Montana. So I think that is a pretty solid conclusion for episode 1 of Braap O'Clock. I'd like to thank Cardo one more time. You can save 10% on Cardo intercom systems using the code KP10. And with that, Mikey, I'll leave it to you. If there's anything you'd like to say, where people can find you, or any last words you'd like to share.
See if you can keep up. Oh shit! Oh shit!
Hell yeah, Mikey.
Hell yeah, brother.
Who would win in a fight, a horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?